Welcome to Belgrade Online. We're glad you decided to join us today. I'm Jodi, and I'll be your host. Here at Belgrade, we hope to encourage you in your journey and explore what that means in new and beautiful ways. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode. Up next, announcements. Then we will see who's having birthdays and anniversaries this week. After that, we will hear from the pastor, the scriptures, and let the Spirit move you with some music before I come back to see you off. Welcome to Belgrade Online. This week is Second Harvest. That means we are looking for your help to bless our community by distributing produce to people in need. If you are available on Monday from about 10:30 a.m. to 1:15 p.m., please come to the Belgrade parking lot here at 325 Sherman in North Mankato around 10:30 on Monday. We hope to see you there.
It's time for Bundle Me Warm. Please bring your new or gently used coats, hats, and mittens to Belgrade. We will be collecting items from now until October 19th for the Salvation Army. All sizes are welcome. Items may be placed in the labeled blue totes in our lobby. Contact our office if you need access to drop off your items.
This week's birthdays and anniversaries. On the 11th, happy birthday,
Meng Sing Lindsay.
On the 13th, happy birthday,
Brody Cox.
On the 9th, happy anniversary,
Ron and Lois Smoke.
On the 10th, happy anniversary,
Dan and Jodi Zimmerli.
On the 14th, happy anniversary,
Les and Dawn Madsen.
On the 14th, happy anniversary,
Mike and Marilyn Sandersfeld.
Have a great week.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Hope you all are having a fantastic weekend so far. Enjoying this beautiful fall weather out here. The leaves are all turning fall colors, and it's beautiful. And we're continuing, and it's actually the conclusion of our series that we've been in called Help, Navigating Life's Messiness. And so we've been talking about, the fact that we all have messes, and God's will is that we don't just get transported out of our messes, but that we learn how to navigate through them. And we talked about, what some of those messes are, like stress and failure. And so today we're going to finish out the series by talking a little bit about anxiety and how to have peace of mind in the midst of all of our anxieties and our messes, and a few tips and practical things that I hope are helpful to you as you continue to navigate the things that we equate to messes in your life as well. So I pray that's helpful. Hope that it all hits home with you. And again, let us know. Shoot us an email or comment down below, or just give us a little something to let us know that this is helpful to you. And I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Grace and peace to you all. We'll see you soon.
Well, we're at the tail end. Today's the last Sunday in our series called Help, Navigating Life's Messes. And so as we sort of close out this series, we're going to talk about something that's more on the positive side, because so far this week we've been talking about the messes that we go through. The first week we talked about the fact that life's messy. All of our lives are a mess. In many times, in many ways, it's not exclusive to just us. Everybody deals with a mess in our lives in some way, whether it's a mess in our relationships, a mess on our job, a mess in our checkbooks, or our bank accounts, a mess in our bodies and our physical health, a mess in our churches, a mess in our world and our culture, the way the things are going. We all deal with it in some way, shape, or form. And listen, we all want the pressure of the mess to just be taken away. We want to get down on our knees and pray for God to take away our mess, get us out of it, and get the pressure off. But that's not usually how life works, and that's not usually how God works. We talked about Psalm 23. It's though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, God, for you are with me. Not, I will fear no evil because, take it away, Lord. God promises to be with us in the midst of our messes of our everyday life. And so the series is about how do we navigate some of the messes. And so we talked the next week about stress and how to navigate some issues with stress. And the next week after that, we talked about how to navigate some issues with failure, and the fact that we all have an aversion to failure. We don't like failure, but there's something about learning how to deal with it and accept that failure is inevitable. And in order to move on in life, we can either take our failures and let them sink us and get completely discouraged, or we can realize that we can't grow unless we fail. The whole idea of practicing anything is leading yourself through repeated failure so that you can specifically learn each new time you try something. I've been playing guitar now for over 30 years, and in music college, I would practice 6 to 9 hours a day outside of the classroom. And literally all practice is you mess up and you figure out why you messed up, and then you try to fix it the next time you play the line, and so that's all it is you deal with failure over and over and over again. And it's true with our lives. And so dealing with failure and accepting failure is absolutely paramount and essential in learning to grow in life. Now today, so we talked about kind of the negative things, messes and stresses and failure, but now we're going to talk about the flip side of the coin. We're gonna start off talking a little bit about anxiety, but we're gonna move on and talking about the complement, the flip side, the positive side to that. And so I remember a few years ago, my family had an opportunity to go to Disney World, and there's some good friends of ours that one of the couple worked at the Disney store in Ridgedale Mall in Minnetonka, and because they worked for the Disney store, they got all kinds of perks, which is a bunch of free tickets and fast passes and free parking at Disney, and we would have never been able to afford to go to Disney World had we not had a friend that was like, "Why don't you come with us? We can get you here and here because we got these passes." And we said, "Well, sure," So we were looking to go on a vacation, and this just kind of worked. So we went with them, and now my middle daughter Hannah. She's since she was born, she's known as the tornado. She's like she's the one that will get all excited about going somewhere and playing laser tag, and will like put the war paint on and she's the one that's competitive and she's going to dominate. She somehow heard about this roller coaster called Everest at the Animal Kingdom in Disney World, and if you know what Everest is. You know that it's a gigantic roller coaster, and they made this replica, sort of obviously smaller scale replica of Mount Everest, and it's a few hundred feet high, and inside of this artificial mini mountain is where the roller coaster is. And at one point, you go up, and the roller coaster does its roller coaster thing, and you go up to the top, and the roller coaster stops about, 250 feet in the air, and the track in front of you is ripped apart, and there's nothing. And there's like this 100-foot tall animatronic Yeti that's like, it looks down on you as if the Yeti has torn apart the track. And all of a sudden, the roller coaster stops, and it shoots you backwards down where you just went at like 70 miles an hour, and at some points in the pitch black, of this artificial mountain. And Hannah, she was probably about 6 at this time, 6 or 7. She really wanted to go on this roller coaster. And I know that they have height requirements. They don't have age requirements, but they have height requirements. And in my mind, I'm like, there's no way she's going to meet the height requirement to this ride. So I kept telling her, well, I tell you what, I didn't want to be the parent that stifled her dreams, and was like, no, I'm not going to let you go on this ride. I was trying to teach them to make their own decisions, and she was 6 or 7, and so I wanted to kind of give her a healthy perspective that you're not going to like this ride. You think it's going to be fun, but let's start with the kiddie roller coasters first. Let's not go straight for the jugular here. And because she'd never been on a roller coaster at all, but she wanted to go on Everest. So I said, you know what? There is a height. I said, if you want to, you can go on it. There's a height requirement though, and you're probably not going to meet the height requirement. And so we went on YouTube and looked at, there's people that have gone on the ride with cameras and they've videotaped it. And so I said, you sure you want to go on this? That looks awesome, Daddy. I want to go on this ride. I said, I tell you what, if you meet the height requirement, you can go on the ride. Never in a million years would I thought that she would meet the height requirement. We get there that day, we're at the Animal Kingdom, and she walks right up to the line, and the tip of the highest hair on her head skims the bottom of the line. And the person, the worker says, all right, go ahead. And I looked at the worker and I was like, and he's like, oh, she's tall enough. I was like, thank you. And I'm like, what am I going to do now? I've already committed myself, so I guess we're on this roller coaster, and it's safe. The worst that's going to happen is she's going to get off and go, I don't want to go on another roller coaster again or something, So we get on the roller coaster, and we're starting to go up, and I'm feeling like the worst parent in the world. And so we're going up on this thing, and it brings you, it kind of inches you to the top of that first hump. And she's starting to go, oh, this is really high. I'm like, yeah, it's going to be fun. Put your hands in the air. I'm fine, but I'm worried about her. So I'm trying to make light of it. And it goes up and over, and it goes down and up and around and does the thing. And I'm like, yay. And I look over, and she has fainted. And she's just like, and I'm like, oh boy, parent of the year right here, And so we're going up, and she kind of wakes up, and it's right about the time that we get to the end of this track with the ripped up thing, and you can see over the peak of the mountain and down and everywhere, and this big, animatronic monster looking down at her, and it shoots us backwards, and she wakes up, and she's like, faints again. Fantastic. Well, so we get on down, and by the time she's up and into it, the ride is over, and I was like, wasn't that great? And she's like, I don't want to go on that again. I said, oh, you'll be fine. Oh, geez, And I have a picture that I usually show, but Hannah has asked me not to show this picture anymore, so I won't show it. And the picture, so I'm not showing it, but the picture is actually from the next day at the Magic Kingdom on one of the kiddie roller coasters. And it's a snapshot of, they take the picture, and then you can go on the app and get your picture. Well, the picture's from one of the kiddie roller coasters that she did not faint on. But the friends that we were there with, our older daughter and the friend's daughter, were in the front seat, and they're like, yeah, on this little Seven Dwarfs roller coaster. And in the mini roller coaster, in the second seat is Hannah going like, so that's how she was on the mini one, and on Everest she fainted twice. And so that is the picture of anxiety. And so many of us feel like that in our everyday lives. In some situations, we feel like we're either going to faint because of so much anxiety. There's so many things we have to do. There's so many pressures. We got to go to work. We got stuff going on at work. We got the kids at home. We got the million things the kids are involved in, or grandkids, or we've got our health deteriorating, or we've got car issues, or job situations, or what have you, personal issues we deal with, marital issues, relationship issues. There's so many things, so many anxieties that seem to absolutely paralyze us. And many of us experience every single day some form of anxiety. And then there's some of us that deal with heightened anxiety all the time, that have a general anxiety disorder, which is becoming even more and more rampant in our modern culture because of the constant pressure to perform, and the constant pressure to do everything just right, and the constant this and this and that. And it's difficult to find ourselves our own little peace of mind in the midst of our culture nowadays, and in the midst of all the million things we have going on in our lives. And so this morning I want to talk a little bit about kind of the flip side. I don't want to talk about the negative part, the anxiety part. I want to talk about the positive. In the midst of all of our messes, in the midst of our anxieties and our stresses and our failures and our everything, how do we attain peace of mind? How do we attain this kind of thing? Now, again, I always put this disclaimer out. I'm not saying that if you follow all the tips in this message that you're going to eliminate all of your anxiety and your stress or anything like that. I'm not saying that. You know, it's a very complex problem, and it's not ever solved by a sermon or any one thing. Many people need counseling and therapy and medication and things for these. So this is not a substitute for anything like that. This is just tips to help navigate through these things to keep in mind. So with that said, let's move on to this. And now, so we're going to talk about gaining peace of mind. And as we do this, we're going to look at a couple aspects of the life of Moses. And we're going to do this from a scripture passage that's sort of reflecting back on the life of Moses from Hebrews chapter 11, verses 23 to 28. I'm going to read that now so we can put that up on the screen. So Hebrews 11, 23 to 28. And so here's our scripture reading for this morning. And it says, "By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict." I'll explain this more in a moment. And so it says, "By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. And he regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. And by faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. And by faith, he kept the Passover and the application of blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. And this is the word of God for the people of God." And we all said, "Thanks be to God." Now, if you're saying, "I have no idea how that scripture verse fits in or makes any sense to what you just talked about before that," that's good, because that's what we're going to talk about. So, the life of Moses. Now, this scripture passage is interesting because many people know the life of Moses. Many people are familiar with the story where God's people were in slavery in this Egyptian time. And in this story, God's people had been in slavery for quite a few centuries. And Moses gets raised up. He's been called by God, and he is birthed by an Egyptian woman. And during this time, by a Hebrew woman, sorry. He's born into a Hebrew family. But during this time, the Pharaoh gives this edict to destroy all of the Hebrew children. They're growing at such a rate, and he's afraid that they're gonna just overpower the Egyptians, that the Hebrews are going to overpower the Egyptians and overthrow them and whatever. So he gives this decree, this edict, that all the young Hebrew children are going to be destroyed. So this Hebrew mother takes Moses and hides him for quite a few months, and then sends him down a river in this little package, little boat package, and he's found and picked up by an Egyptian woman the Egyptian girl who happens to be the daughter of Pharaoh. And Moses, a Hebrew, ends up being raised by this Egyptian princess. And now Moses is raised sort of as an Egyptian prince. But no one knows that he's actually a Hebrew. And the Pharaoh's daughter keeps it secret. And so he goes through all these situations. So that's the backstory of the scripture. Now, understanding that, let's kind of unpack it. What does this have to do with having peace of mind in the face of life's troubles and anxiety? Well, here's how we'll attack this. So the first thing is that as we look at this, Moses lived a life of tension, and he lived a life of conflict. So even though he was born into this cushy situation, he was born to the most powerful family pretty much in the world at that time. He had anything he wanted. He still lived a life of tension and conflict. Like I said, in the midst of sort of this mass infant genocide that was about to go on, Moses is hidden and basically given away by his parents and raised kind of as an orphan in a culture that he was not meant to be in. And as he's raised in this culture, he gets to a point where he realizes where he comes from and who his real family is, and he kind of receives this dream, this calling from God to take God's people, lead them out of slavery, and then lead them into a land that's been promised to them where there's no subjugation, where there's no poverty, and this people can thrive as a culture and as a kind of a new little people group. Yet at every step of the way, there's adversity. The Pharaoh won't let him go. This whole process when they actually do leave Egypt is plagued by pretty much the Egyptians trying to hunt them to a specific point. But then after they're released from and delivered from Egypt's grip, Moses is trying to lead this people into a promised land, and the very people he's trying to serve, all they do is complain. All they do is get angry that he's not doing what they think what they think he should be doing, and that in the whole process, the very people he's trying to save end up sort of half turning on him, and even turning away from the God that released them in the process. And so, and to the point where he doesn't even see the fruition of his vision. He doesn't even go into the promised land, and the people end up going. So Moses lives this life of tension and adversity, and he knows this. But in the same time, he was a person of inner peace in the midst of all these things. There's a word that encapsulates this idea of inner peace. And the word peace doesn't mean the absence of any conflict. The word peace means wholeness. And when you're talking about inner wholeness, inner peace, there's a word that the Scripture uses that isn't really used much in our modern culture. And this word that is used, not in the Scripture passage, but elsewhere in the Scriptures, to describe this character, this quality of inner peace in the midst of conflict, is this word called meekness. Meekness with an M. Meekness. To be meek is to be a person of strong inner confidence, quiet confidence, inner tranquility, and sort of stalwartness, strength in the midst of shaky situations. But it's a quiet kind of a confidence. It's an inner tranquility. It's in essence, peace of mind in the midst of anxious circumstances. Meekness says when the world's burning down, when everyone's turning against me, when it feels like nothing is going my way, when my checkbook's teetering on zero and I got a lot of bills coming up, when it seems like death is at my door in whatever arena of life that you happen to be experiencing stress in the midst of all that, I'm not going to lose my temper. I'm going to remain fixed on a solution instead of fixed on the problem. I'm going to stay cool instead of getting cool and calm and collected, instead of falling apart completely. Meekness is an attitude. It's an inner quality of strength. The Scriptures say that through all Scriptures, there's two people that are called meek. One is Jesus, and the other is Moses. People who have strong inner tranquility in the midst of storms. So we want to look at how do we attain this quality of meekness? Because meekness is not weakness. A lot of times people can interpret meekness as weakness, but meekness is a very quiet strength, a strength that doesn't need to say, look at me. It's a strength that's very quiet and just navigates the storm. People can misunderstand a person who's meek because they can't see or hear what this person is thinking or doing a lot of times. Meekness comes from within. It's a quality from within. So how do we live into this quality of meekness? Well, I think that there's four things that we can look at that we'll go through here in the next few minutes. In this scripture passage we just read, there's four things that four takeaways that we can pull out and kind of think about and apply to our lives on how to have this sense of meekness, this greater peace of mind in the midst of our storms, in the midst of our struggles, and in the presence of all of our messes. So let's look at these things. So here we go. First thing, how do we live into this quality of peace of mind, this quality of meekness? The first thing is, we talked about this a little bit a few weeks ago, but it's It's this issue of identity. It's the issue of identity. And the identity is the answer to the question, who am I? Who am I really? Who am I right now? You know, like we said, Moses was raised as an Egyptian prince. But in fact, he was a Hebrew. And so when he found out who he was, it changed everything for him. And in the same way, a lot of times, a lot of issues that we have in our lives stem from the fact that we haven't answered the question of who am I? Who am I really? Because when we don't answer the question of who am I, every circumstance sort of pulls us along and we just sort of react in whatever way feels natural to react. And so when we find out who we are, it can determine some of these things. It can determine how we react and how we act in certain situations. Now here's the deal though. When Moses found out who he was, when he answered that question, when he solidified his identity, there's a problem that's posed when you find out who you are. You know, because in our culture, and a lot of times there's a big emphasis on finding yourself. Who am I? Who am I really? But when you find out who you are, that's not the answer to all your problems. It oftentimes unlocks other issues. Because when you find out and you're faced with who you are, the answer to that question, you now have to face a new question, and that's what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with who you are? Because when you find yourself, if who you are is not in line with your present lifestyle, there's going to be some inner turmoil. When who you are seems to conflict with some areas of your life, it can create some dissonance. You know, if I'm not who people think I am, you know, I've always identified myself as this, but I really am this over here. What do you do with that? You know, for example, like Moses, he lived and was raised and identified with the Egyptians, which is a completely different lifestyle than who he really was. The Egyptians were powerful, they were wealthy, they were fluent, they were comfortable. They were the slave drivers. But Moses found his true identity, who he really was, with the Hebrews. The Hebrews were lowly. They were subjugated people. They had a different set of values. They were impoverished. And so Moses' dilemma here is, who am I? Am I going to be a Hebrew or an Egyptian? Am I going to live with a bunch of Hebrew slaves? Or am I going to stay here and live in luxury in the palace? So in verse 24 of our scripture reading, Hebrews 11, verse 24, it says, by faith, and we'll talk about faith in a second here, the kind of the definition here of this, but it says, by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, he refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He refused to be identified as Egyptian royalty. So when he found out who he was, when he really was a Hebrew, he had to come to grips with the fact that, well, what am I going to do with this? I have this comfortable lifestyle over here, but who I really am is with these people over here. In order to be who I really am, it's going to imply, there's a lot of implications there. It's going to mean that I'm going to have to give up a lot of stuff that is normal to me. And so these kinds of issues we deal with. We need to accept who we are. When we find out who we are, we need to accept that. We need to figure it out and we need to accept it. Because what happens a lot of times is if we find out who we are, we try to hide it. We try to mask it. Because we're ashamed or embarrassed or whatever it is, we try to hide who we are. And as one minister put it, if you try to be something you're not or be someone who you are not, that is, over time, a quick way to develop a nasty ulcer. Because it puts an inhumane amount of pressure on us to be who we're not supposed to be. But see, Moses accepted who he was, and so should we. So should we. The first lesson here is do not try to be something you're not. Do not try to be someone who you're not. We should figure out who we are and live into that. Who we are. Accept who you are right now. Relax and be yourself. Whether it's positive or negative, you are very special to God. The scriptures say in the first chapter of Genesis, the creation story tells us that after God created everything and called everything good, oh, it's good, saw that it was good, saw it was good. After he created humanity, you and me and all the rest of us, he said, they're very good. Creation is good. The fall and the leaves and the everything and the beauty of nature, the oceans and whatever, gorgeous, but you are very good. Accepting who you are without shame. You're very good. You are who you are. You can go from there, but the starting point is accepting who you are. Who are you? What's your identity? Because a lot of anxiety and a killer of peace of mind is trying to be someone you're not. And so Moses accepted who he was. And that's one of the first things you can do to attain this meekness, this inner peace of mind, is accept who you are. To be who you are, don't try to be someone you're not. How would we remember Moses today if he stayed in the Pharaoh's court? I read this week. We might think that if Moses would have stayed in Pharaoh's court, we might just think of him as some Egyptian mummy at this point. But instead of knowing that, we have our story in our scriptures that shows us a way more interesting story. A story of someone who is used by their God to deliver slaves and attempt to lead them into not just a new land, but a new way of thinking that isn't an attitude of slavery, but an attitude of free people. Because Moses, once he found out who he was, he made the difficult decision to live into it. And wrestling with that had been very, very tricky. Because over here, he's got all the pleasures and everything that everybody always, everything that everybody wants. But over here, it's his identity, it's his destiny. So it's tricky. But when you quit the facade, when we stop trying to be someone we're not, we can move on, and it gives our subconscious peace of mind. It helps meekness flow in us. Because many times, the anxieties and the stress that we feel in our psychological beings is simply our inability to accept who we are, to have peace of mind. So that's the first thing, identification. Who are you? Who are you? When you accept who you are, it helps God to work more freely inside of you, in your mind, in your life. Accept who you are. Second thing, when you find out who you are, it opens up a whole new set of questions. And basically the bottom line of the second thing is, find out who you are, you've got to accept the responsibilities of who you are. The first one says identity, who am I? The second one is, so who do I really want to be? Who do I want to be in light of who I am? What are the responsibilities? The next verse, Hebrews 11:25. It says this about Moses. It says, he chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. Now, the word sin, a lot of times, there's so much baggage with this word. What comes to your mind when you think of sin, it usually has to do with right and wrong. But a lot of times in Scripture, sin is kind of a word, it's kind of a sliding scale. It could mean different things in different contexts. In essence, sin means anything that misses the target of what God wants and what God's trying to do. We think of it as these practices that we do that are evil, but in essence, it just means missing the target. So we miss the target a lot of times. And so Moses says, the scriptures say that Moses chose to be mistreated along with God's people. He chose his identity and he chose his set of responsibilities. Instead, of living over here in affluence in the face of the slaves. They're affluent, they were rich, they were powerful, the family of the pharaohs and the Egyptians, but they were so at the expense and on the backs of slaves. In this context, that is sinful. And in about every context, that is sinful. And so, Moses accepted his responsibility. When he found out who he was a Hebrew, not an Egyptian. He now was faced with a set of responsibilities. If that's who I am, I can turn my back on who I am and just stay up here, or I can live into my identity. And there's a set of responsibilities that come with that. When you accept who you are, there's a specific pathway that coincides with your identity. And you're responsible for that pathway. And this settling this issue of personal responsibility is a mark of maturity. Because a lot of times with our lives, it's hard to have peace of mind. It's easy to have anxiety because we don't want to accept the life that's put in front of us. We don't want to accept the responsibilities that we have in our lives. We don't want to accept that, there's doors that in order to attain something, there's some doors that need to be shut. Maybe not forever, but in this season of your life. And so in every one of our lives, the responsibilities that we have require us to shut off some other things. And that's very difficult for many of us to accept. When Moses was a kid, when he was a baby, of course, but when he was a toddler, and he could put off these issues of identity. He wouldn't have to. He didn't have to go after. He didn't have to parse these things out. But when you become an adult, you got to make a choice. You got to make a choice, and you got to assume responsibility for who you are. You have to assume responsibility for your own life and your own choices, and then you can move ahead. And again, we live in a culture that loves to shift blame onto everybody else. I'm the way I am because of fill the blank. And that's an easy cop-out, because the minute you do that, it shuts off any need for personal responsibility, because you shift the blame on everything else. I'm the way I am because of this, and I have no control over it, so it's just who I am, Now listen, there are things we don't have control over. We don't have control of, our parents, who our parents were. We don't have control over our family of origin or our location of where we're born, where we grew up. We don't have control over that. We don't have control of our genetic makeup. We don't have control over that. I've got blue eyes. I could change that, I guess, nowadays, but up until this point, I can't change that. I have no control over the past, I've got no control over my physical attributes, how they have been. I have no control over my psychological tendencies of my past. Things that have happened to me or things that have happened around me, I have no control over that. What someone says to me or does to me, I have no control over that. There's some things we don't have any control over, but there's one thing that you do have complete control over. You don't have control over a lot of things, but there's one thing that you do have control of is how you respond to things. You can't control some of the things that happen to you and around you, but you can control how you respond to them. You can respond negatively, you can get critical, you can be focused and centered around the problem, or you can respond in a positive way. You can respond in a solution-oriented manner. Folks that just complain, they usually don't want to change. They just want to complain about the person. They don't want the person or the issue to change. They just want to yak about it. That's why gossip is so harmful. That's why blah, blah, blabbing is so harmful. Because it doesn't create any solutions. It adds to the problem. Now, if you're talking about something to figure out a solution, that's a completely different issue. Honestly, thinking about, you're gossiping and then you tag off at the end of it. Well, I want to figure it out, so I wanted to get that out in the open. Wink, wink. And then you walk away. You never try to figure out a solution. Yeah. No, you just want to gossip. You just want to talk bad about someone. You can't control a situation, everything about a situation, but you can control how you respond to it. Are you problem-oriented or are you a solution-oriented person? Do you want to actually find a solution to the issue? It all has to do with your attitude. One is like this, one is like this. I wonder if. One says, and just complains. And the other says, well, the other can name the issues that they're complaining about, but then they go a step further and say, okay, well, what can we do? How can we do to remedy that? How can we do to grow that? How can we do to maybe not fix it, but how can we get better at that? You know what I mean? One is problem, one is solution. And it all has to do with how you respond. You know, I think of one of my favorite authors and figures of history is Viktor Frankl, who his whole thesis he was a psychologist. He was, he kind of contradicted a lot of Sigmund Freud's work. And Viktor Frankl was a Jewish man who said that, in the face of suffering, you can endure almost anything by choosing how you react, how to find meaning in your suffering. And so Viktor Frankl was a Jewish man during the Holocaust, and he had an opportunity to escape a concentration camp, but he wanted to prove his theories correct, so he willingly went to Auschwitz. He willingly let them take him. And he documents his whole experience in the book called Man's Search for Meaning. But his whole story is you can get through anything that you can't control by finding meaning in your suffering. You can't change what happens to you, but you can change how you react to it. And the word, accepting your responsibility, break the word down, your response ability. Your ability to respond to things in your life. The ability to respond in a certain way. Responsibility. How do you respond to the things? You walk into, you walk into a messy situation, you have two options. Complain or name the issue and figure out a way forward. But a lot of times we stick with the complaining because we know if we figure out a solution, then we're obligated to have to work for it. We're obligated to have to take steps to remedy the situation then. It puts responsibility on us. Complaining puts no responsibility. It pushes responsibility on others. Complaining devoids us of any ownership in the matter. We're just the person on the couch watching the football team complaining on the coach. But if we went on the field, we'd do 10 times worse than the coach did. That's the one thing, but it's another thing to accept the responsibility, to name the issues and say, all right, here's how we go forward. All right, what's going to be my role in that going forward? My responsibility. Responsibility. When you assume responsibility for your own attitude, you can begin to experience less anxiety and more peace. Because 9 out of 10 times, that thing that you're anxious about, that anxiety will go away if you do it. If you're anxious about a certain thing, usually, unless there's a greater, I'm talking about if you don't have like an anxiety disorder or something, if there's just normal anxiety about something, if you do it, if you take care of it, the anxiety goes away. We got to face it. We got to accept our responsibility. It's like, the same sun hits both clay and wax, but clay and wax respond differently to the exact same rays. Clay hardens, wax melts. How are we gonna respond to the situations? So that's the first two things. Who am I? What am I going to do about it? The third and fourth thing we'll go through pretty quickly here. The third thing is decide your priorities. At the time of Moses, much of the world's wealth was stored in Egypt during that time. Moses had what everybody seeks to attain their entire life. He had it in abundance. He had power, he had pleasure, and he had possessions. That's pretty much the American dream right there, which is a smokescreen, by the way. It doesn't give you real meaning. It'll leave you feeling empty, which pretty much everybody who has like the American dream down, who's rags to riches, they'll tell you that when I got the riches, it didn't fix anything. I still had my problems. Because their issues are within, not from without. But Moses had it. He had the power. He had the pleasure. He had the possessions. But God asked him to live for something deeper than those things. God gave him a dream. And by this, namely, God gave Moses something deeper than power, possession, or pleasure. He gave him purpose. Purpose transcends all those other things. When you have a purpose in mind, you have a reason to get up in the morning. You want peace of mind? Get a strong sense of purpose for something. Start working for others. This is why in AA, one of the final steps in the 12-step process, which they'll tell you if you don't get this step down, forget about the rest of the steps. It's that you have to help someone else out. You have to help someone else through their suffering. When you have purpose, you're helping other people out in some way. Purpose has a mission in your heart and in your mind. You exist for this. And it may not be a strong one thing. It could be something general, but you have purpose. And when you have purpose, the power and the possessions and the pleasure, they don't mean as much. And there's nothing wrong with power and possession and pleasure in and of themselves. It's just the fact that many of us, especially in the West, we make those things our God. We make power and possession and wealth, we give them so much power over us that they grip us instead of something we enjoy and then get back to our purpose. Many of us, a lot of times, we want everything else. But God is trying to give us some sort of purpose. And it's different for every one of us. We've got to figure that out. So you got, who am I? What am I going to do about it? And what are my priorities? Because priorities are always determined by purpose. In verse 26 of our scripture, it says that Moses regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. There was a greater purpose he was focused on. So Moses was able to leave all the power and the pleasure and the possessions of Egypt and identify with his people, who he was. His purpose determined his priorities. And in your life, your purpose determines your priorities. When you get your purpose down and your priorities straight, you're willing to do certain things and you're not willing to do other certain things. And this might make you unpopular with some. This might make you unpopular with your job. This might make you unpopular with your neighbors. This might make you unpopular with certain friends, you know what I mean? Because you're not willing to do all the cultural things that you're supposed to do because you are focused on a purpose in your life. And you have your priorities in the correct order. Purpose determines priorities. That helps you have peace of mind because you're not so conflicted by 1,000 different doors opening and shutting. Which way do I go? When you have your priorities straight, you pretty much have a strong sense of what to do and where to go. And finally, so we've got, who are you? Who am I? What are you going to do about it? What are my priorities? And finally, you got to face your difficulties. Hebrews 11:27 in our scripture passage, it says, by faith Moses left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger, but persevered because he saw him who is invisible. Moses had his purpose in front of him over here, with a lot of unknowns around it that he was heading towards, and he had all the problems and the difficulties over here that were very clear what this person wanted to do to him. And that's a big difficulty. That can produce so much fear. But in the midst of it, Moses chose to face the difficulties. He accepted them, and he persevered. He endured. Listen, in your life, in our lives, if we want to move forward, if we want to grow, there's going to be suffering, there's going to be pain, there's going to be difficulties. No pain, no gain. That's the name of life. There's no progress in our life without some kind of sacrifice. It just doesn't exist. There's one of my favorite psychologists, he says this, Carl Jung. He says, when we get into a neuroses or some sort of issue like anxiety or whatever, it says it's usually a substitute for legitimate suffering. You can say it this way. If we refuse to face our suffering, if we refuse to face the difficult things, usually it will affect us in some psychological way. If we put off facing our fears, if we put off facing fill in the blank, that thing will subconsciously torment us. And a lot of our anxieties are there because we refuse to face our demons. We refuse to face our difficulties. We refuse to accept where we're really at and what we're really dealing with because it's too difficult. But when we refuse to accept our pain and face it, it ends up wreaking all kinds of havoc in other areas. It comes out in stress. It comes out in anxiety. It comes out in these things, and it will come out physically eventually. So many people I know that have so many physical issues, and the doctors have no idea why they're there. I'll tell you why they're there. It's undealt with psychological issues. It's the plague of the West, of the Western world. We got all the knowledge. We also got all the anxiety. Most of all the mental disabilities that come with, like, I'm talking about stress and anxiety and all these things, most of those things are in the West, in the world. There's so many other cultures that don't deal with any of this. It's because of how we live here. We say we're free. We're not free. We're slaves. We're slaves to our own inner workings. But don't let your problems destroy you. Everybody has difficulties in every stage of our life, and we got to face them. And how we respond to them will determine how we can advance. Now listen, all these things have one thing in common. We talked about it a little bit, but I'm going to close with this. All these things in life, all these things have one thing in common. There's a lot of things in life that you cannot change. And when it comes to those things, you need to accept them. There's a lot of things you can change, and you work for a solution, but there's a lot of things you can't change. You need to accept that. If I keep fighting about the things I can't change, saying, God, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair, you keep fighting about it, wrestling with it, you're going to make yourself miserable. We've got to accept the things we can't change. Faith is facing facts without being too discouraged by them. Faith is facing the facts, accepting, and moving forward. You've got to accept where you're at. You got to accept what you struggle with. You got to accept who you are. There's a lot of things that have happened to you that you cannot change. You have to accept it. And you got to move on. You can't move on if you don't accept it. What can be changed in me? And it requires honest, gut-level inventory sometimes. Sometimes it's just a matter of going, all right, this happened. This is the new reality. This is my reality. Okay. And you accept it, and once you accept it, it's all of a sudden, this weight is lifted. And you can see clearly, and you can move forward. That old mindset might creep in. You got it. You might have to step back and do it again. But you accept it again, and you move on. Training your brain. Training your psyche. Over and over and over again. How do I contribute to my issues? How do my habits and hang-ups and tendencies contribute to my difficulties? Because those are the things that can be changed. How can I change the things that can be changed and accept the things that cannot? And once you get that down, that gives you an incredible amount of peace of mind. And as I finish, as I'll just tell you this quick 30-second story here. Like I keep talking about how I've been building this guitar, and over the summer, and I'm just about finished. I finished all the painting and the buffing and everything. Now just kind of little details I gotta finish and put it together. It'll be done in a couple of days. But there's been I've made mistakes every single way along the way. And there's one mistake when this is my second guitar body. The first one right when we were about to get ready to start finishing it, the router destroyed it and ripped it apart. And I'm standing there looking at this mangled guitar with the grain all out, and there's no fixing that. And it took me quite a few days to accept that. I was really torn up about it. And the former pastor here, Dan Horn, who we were doing this with, he kind of kept consoling me, but like, listen, we'll start over, we'll get it done, we'll get it again, and and I was ready to just buy the body. I'm like, forget it, I'm done with it. I'm so irritated, I can't do it. And he's like, you've never done this before. He goes, I've never done this before. He's like, listen, you'll be so glad you did. You can say, I made that. And and it took me to look at, and this is just a little thing. This is making something, This is not even talking about our whole life, but this little thing tore me up inside because I was so excited about finishing it. And instead of finishing it, now I got to start all over again. But the moment I accepted it, I can't believe this happened. Why did this have to happen? I keep looking at it again, and oh, come on, The moment I accepted it, I had this realization that I can't fix that. It happened. I can't change it. I can start over again and do it again. And I did it, and now that it's done and all finished and polished, it looks amazing, And I'm so glad I didn't quit. But it took me accepting it that this is not going to be fixed by me sitting and wishing that it didn't happen. So I went out to my miter saw, and I cut it in half. And I cut it into little pieces, and I said, there, I can't fix it. I couldn't fix it before, but now it just added this little thing. I know that I can't fix this thing and I can move on. And you can't always take your problems out and slice them up with a miter saw, nor should you. But the point is that when you accept the issues, when you accept the things you can't change, it helps shift your focus on the things you can. And the things that you can change are within you, are within all of us. With that said, let's stand. God, we thank you for reminding us that our lives are a sum of things that happen to us, that happen within us, that happen around us, and also how we respond to those things. God, I ask that you'd help us to be proactive in accepting the things that we can't change and shifting our focus to the things we can within ourselves. Help us to react in the ways that we can control. Because so many times, God, it's not our circumstances you're trying to change, it's us. And that's growth. It's transformation. Through this realization, God, accepting the things we can't change and working on the things we can within ourselves, Lord, you're teaching us this quality of meekness and peace of mind. And I pray that you'll help us to remember to stop. Help remind us in the moment. Help us to stop and accept, calibrate, and move on. And stop again if we catch ourselves, and calibrate and move on. And help us to keep going through this and retraining our beings to accept this way of living that leads to meekness, that leads to less anxiety. Might not cure it, but it'll be less anxiety and more peace of mind. And I pray that you remind us, each and every one of us. So we trust you, that you've got our backs, and that you're leading us through the valley of the shadow of death and through our messes as you help us to navigate them instead of get rid of them. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Whatever my Hopefully that works. I don't know. We're going with it. Changed harmony halfway through the song. I'm like, okay, well, this sounds good. People will love it.
We did it.
We did it. We did it. Oh boy. Yay! Now you can go swelter.
Hey everyone, it's me, Jodi. I'm back to see you off. We hope you enjoyed your time with us today and that it was meaningful and life-giving. If you want to stay on top of things at Belgrade and know when we will be back, make sure to click the like button on Facebook or YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And be sure to hit the bell icon to get alerted when the next episode of Belgrade Online is available. Until next time, I'm Jodi. Thank you for watching and have a great week.